Last winter, the United States was hit with a polar vortex, which brought with it some of the coldest temperatures we've seen in recent history. As far south as Nashville, we were seeing temperatures that approached 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, all that cold weather meant that Americans needed a lot of heating. But where does that heating come from? Well, for the majority of Americans, that heating comes from natural gas. In fact, during this past winter, we saw Americans consume 3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. To put that in perspective, that's more gas than we had in our entire stockpiles as recently as 1 decade ago. Now, fortunately, there's been a major boom in domestic natural gas production thanks to the shale gas revolution. In fact, according to the CIA World Factbook, American natural gas production has increased by 37% over the past 7 years, and America has recently become the largest producer of natural gas in the world. Now, this was extremely positive during last winter because without all that natural gas, many Americans would have literally been left out in the cold. Now, America becoming the world's largest producer of natural gas has many benefits across a wide range of areas of our society. And that's why I'm here to argue today that it's time for America to fully embrace natural gas as the short-term solution to our energy issues. And that's because of its positive impact that it has on our economy, our foreign policy, and our environment. We'll start with the economy. I don't think Americans fully appreciate just how well off we have it when it comes to cheap natural gas prices. As recently as 2007, we saw prices very similar to those in Europe and Japan. But in the past 7 years, we've seen a 30% decrease in the price of natural gas. And now we can buy natural gas for 1/3 of the price that is sold in Europe and 1/6 of the price that is sold in Japan. Now that's great for businesses, but it's also great for average Americans. In fact, a study by the IHS Global Initiative found that the average American family saves $1,200 per year due to cheap natural gas. That's a lot of extra spending money to keep in the pocket. And furthermore, it affects our businesses and our manufacturing sector. And that's because natural gas is used in everything from electricity to heating, to cooking, to feedstock, fertilizer, plastics, pharmaceutical, steel, and transportation. If you look around the room, there's almost nothing you can see or feel that hasn't in some way been impacted by the low price of natural gas in America. And this positive effect on our businesses is why the McKinsey Institute estimates that by 2020, natural gas prices will have had a 4% positive increase on our gross domestic product. We're talking about $400 billion of positive effect on our economy. That's simply an amount that is nearly unprecedented by anything else in our world economy. And furthermore, this is not just a domestic issue. It affects our foreign policy and our standing in the overall world. We've seen a great example of this recently when Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed the Crimean Peninsula. There's a major outcry from the international community for the Western powers to sanction Putin's government. Now, for Europe, this is very difficult because Europe is tied to Russia by natural gas. So sanctioning their energy sector is like shooting yourself in the foot. Europe is very reliant on Russia, on the Russian government, to import its energy that it so desperately needs. In America, over the past 7 years, we haven't had this issue because we've been producing our energy at home. And this is why Joseph Nye from the Harvard JFK School of Government describes natural gas as America's geopolitical trump card. You may be surprised to hear that energy independence is actually on its way for the United States, in large part thanks to our boom in natural gas production. In fact, just 7 years ago, the U.S. was importing over a quarter of its total energy. Today, that number is down to 16%. According to the EIA, by 2030, that will be down to 3%. We are moving towards energy independence, which means we are moving away from our dependence on other countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, countries with unstable and corrupt governments that we don't want to have to rely on. This is a major development for our geopolitics and for our country. It means we can be less reliant on the Middle East for our energy that we so desperately need. And furthermore, I'm going to argue that natural gas has been a positive for our environment. In fact, the EPA lists natural gas as one of its clean energy sources. And that's because natural gas is by far the cleanest of fossil fuels. In fact, it releases less than 50% less of the carbon dioxide that coal releases when it's burned, and 33% less carbon dioxide than oil. We all know the dramatic impact that climate change can have on our society if humans continue to emit carbon at high rates. But natural gas is an option that is viable and much cleaner than anything else we have available in our society when it comes to fossil fuels. And this is already having a positive effect. As natural gas production increases, we are shifting away from high carbon alternatives like coal and towards low carbon alternatives like natural gas. And that's why you may be surprised to hear that over the past 7 years since the natural gas boom began, America has decreased its carbon footprint by 10%. We've seen nearly every year carbon dioxide emissions have decreased in America, and that's unprecedented in the history of our country. Now, critics may argue that natural gas cannot be a long-term solution. It's still a fossil fuel. It still releases carbon dioxide. And I actually agree with that idea. They will argue that we need to instead embrace renewables. And once again, I agree. I am pro-solar and pro-wind. I believe that we should invest in these alternatives. But in the short term, we have to be realistic. According to the National Academy of Sciences, only 2.4% of our total energy production comes from wind and solar combined. We can double that, we can triple that, and we should. We should invest in that, we should research that. But even under the most optimistic of projections, it will be decades before renewables can make a huge positive impact on our energy sector. And so for the short term, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to continue to rely on coal and petroleum, or can we make the shift to low carbon releasing natural gas? And businesses across the country are already starting to answer that question. We've seen several businesses decide to shift away from coal and shift towards gas. In fact, a study from Duke estimates in the near future about 56% of coal-fired power plants will become uneconomical because they simply are wasting too much money on coal when they could be saving money with natural gas. We've even seen this university, Vanderbilt, move away from coal power and towards natural gas power for the economic and environmental reasons I've discussed. Now, other critics will be afraid of embracing natural gas because some of the potential concerns and risks involved with the process known as hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. And fracking is the counterculture method of extracting natural gas from deep shale rock formations. I share some of these concerns, and I promote the United States government to continue to research, investigate, and regulate this practice. But at the same time, we have to recognize that the data, that the literature to date, has not suggested anywhere near the costs that the critics have associated with fracking. For example, critics have alleged that fracking could cause earthquakes, but the United States Geological Society has come out and said that this is near impossible and that any seismic activity caused by drilling or fracking be extremely minor and imperceptible to humans. In Pennsylvania, citizens were worried that fracking in their state could cause contamination of groundwater, but the EPA went in 2011 and found zero evidence that this was occurring. And finally, the largest and most comprehensive study of hydraulic fracturing was conducted at MIT by then professor and current U.S. Secretary of Energy, Ernest Moniz. And he concluded, after looking at all the data, that any risks and costs associated with fracking were manageable by regulation. We must also realize that any production of energy comes with risks and comes with costs. We know about the environmental concerns associated with oil and coal production. We know about the risks associated with nuclear production. And we also know that things like hydroelectric energy, which are considered renewable, can have devastating effects on ecosystems. So we must realize that producing energy comes with costs and benefits. And because the costs are relatively low with natural gas and the benefits to our economy, foreign policy, and environment, as I mentioned, are so incredibly high, I believe that natural gas can be the short-term solution for the United States. And many green organizations in the United States agree with me and see natural gas as somewhat of a stepping stone between high-carbon solutions and a renewable future. So in conclusion, natural gas has already had an incredible positive effect on our manufacturing and business sectors. It has reduced our carbon footprint and has made us more energy independent. And that's why I think it's time for the United States to fully embrace natural gas as our future of energy. And now that means fighting back against the anti-drill activists in places like Pennsylvania and New York. It means embracing natural gas for a solution for our transportation systems, our automobiles, replacing petroleum with cleaner burning natural gas. But most of all, it means that our government should sing the praise of natural gas, should explain to Americans how much this is affecting our economy and our foreign policy and our environment, so that we can fully grasp and understand just how big a deal natural gas is to our country. Because I believe that we can be the generation that ends coal. I believe that we can be the generation that shifts away from high carbon sources to low carbon sources and towards a renewable and sustainable future. And I believe that we can do this through natural gas. Thank you.